This is Full Draw Friday, episode number 9. Hey everybody, this is episode number 9 of the Full Draw Friday edition of the Ridgehunteroutdoors podcast. Nate's in on this one, so it's not just me for a change. We just actually got done recording Monday's episode, so if you guys listen to that, appreciate that a lot. We'll have another one coming up this Monday. I do want to say before we get started, because I did forget on the last one we recorded, Merry Christmas, everybody. I hope everybody does have a good Christmas.
Yeah.
Coming up here in 2 days from when this podcast comes out, which is wild to think about, and then it'll be 2023 just like that.
Yep.
So, anyway, Merry Christmas to everybody out there. Hope you have a good one. Hope you get all the hunting stuff that you want that was on your list.
Yes.
Whatever that may be. But we're going to talk a little bit about cull bucks today, and I don't remember if we did a full episode on it last year. I know I've done a video on it as well, but and obviously we're not reaching everybody, but you see it a lot, guys, especially whether it be professional guys, TV guys, and all that shoot what they call cull bucks.
Yeah.
Every year, late in the season.
Yep.
Honestly, what most of that has to do with is they ain't killed a buck yet, and they needed to shoot something, and this scraggly little either 3-year-old or 4-year-old came by, and they said, hey, that's a cull buck. We don't want those genetics. Let's kill him.
Yep. Wrong place, wrong time for that little guy.
Exactly. And you hear guys talk about that even with, like, 2-year-old deer. And one of the big things is a spike's always a spike. You know, you've heard that before. You'll see 2-year-old deer that are kind of scrappy-horned, and you think, well, he'll never amount to anything. When the reality is, until a deer is probably 4, because even 3-year-olds, they have the potential to still blow up even from 3 to 4, and even 4 to 5. But until a deer hits like 4.5, where we're at, you don't really know what that deer is going to be.
I agree.
And that's probably, to me, that's the biggest thing against shooting a cull buck is, like, you have no idea. Like, that deer could have been injured that year.
Yeah.
It could be genetics.
Yep.
Even if it is genetics, he might blow up and be something really unique the next year. There's a lot of things that could have happened. Maybe it was a really stressful rut the year before. They didn't have a lot of food around.
Yeah.
Between like 2.5 and 3.5. So he just didn't grow much that year. Maybe this year it's easier on him. They got more food. He's going to blow up the next year. There's so many things that go into why a deer is the antler size it is that don't have to do with genetics. But that is also the thing guys refer to a lot when they're talking about cull bucks, from what I've seen, is we got to get him out of the gene pool.
Yep.
I know you've heard that.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And you have no idea what does you have that live there all the time that carry those same genes.
Exactly.
So, I mean, you'll never get rid of it. I don't think it's a bad idea, but...
Like in principle, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
But as far as like specifically eradicating a gene from your area, that's not going to happen. Because your does, you got no way to know. You know, you can kill that buck and you can stop him, but you don't know how many other does are carrying those same genes. It's gonna really pass that on. Specifically, I'll go back to that buck that the neighbors found dead last year. He was at least 5 that I know of. I don't know that he would have made 120 inches. I don't think he would have. I wanted to kill him the year before when he was at least 4. I saw him from the tree one time. He stayed out in this little thick patch in the middle of a field out there where you couldn't get to him. Unless you had like a rocket launcher or something.
Right.
Like he stayed out there, and that's just what he did because there's doe stayed out there too.
Yeah.
And he just didn't come on me in the daylight at all. But at night he was there like all the time.
Yeah.
But he stayed out there in the middle of the field where he knew nothing could get to him. You know. The year before, when I was certain he was at least 3, I could have shot him in second gun season. I was sitting on the ground next to a big oak tree where I'd sat before, looking over 2 different fields, sitting in a fence row looking over 2 different fields. He came up about 15 yards away from me, just walking behind this doe. He was a 7-pointer, and I thought, you got to be at least 3 years old. You look like you're about 110 inches, and I don't like you. I wanted to kill him, but then I was like, I also don't want to shoot a 110-inch 7-pointer. You know, like that's just not. I hadn't killed a buck, but I thought you know, if I shoot you, I'm absolutely going to say it's to cull you.
Yeah, right.
But you still are young enough that you could turn into something. You know, for him, he didn't. He stayed. He finally grew an 8th point. You know, but his left side was always weaker than his right side. It was definitely him. You know, and he. Because his left side, he only had 3 points on it that year when I thought he was 3. The next year he did have 8 points, but that left side was weak. And then even last year when he was what I thought 5, and just a humongous fat deer.
Yeah.
We know that he would have weighed upper 200s on the hoof. He'd
push 300.
I really think he would have pushed 300 on the hoof.
He would have got close.
I mean, he's just a humongous bodied deer.
Yeah, he's long too.
Yeah. And I don't know that he made 120 inches. The neighbors found him dead in the creek. I don't know what happened to him. I don't care. It was good. You know?
Right.
Because he was, I did not want to waste a tag on him. But if Fatty would have came by, it was absolutely going to be a hunt for Fatty.
Right.
You know?
Right.
But yeah, he was a cull buck if I've ever seen one.
Right.
But and then this year I had pictures of a deer that's very similar. You know, younger. I think he was a 4-year-old. But you know that gene's still out there,
right?
For sure,
right. And you're gonna have some of that. But they were like, hit on like 3 things right there, and I'll go in kind of backwards order. You're talking about him being like 5 years old for sure.
I gave him a chance.
Right. Most deer at 5 are gonna be what they're gonna be. There are like if you'll. Bill Winke, for an example, I was listening to him on a podcast, and he was talking about some deer that he had that didn't grow until 6, 7, 8 years old. Obviously, deer aren't living that long like where we're hunting.
Nah.
So it's not to say that it couldn't happen if you're in somewhere where you can let them get that old, or they do get that old. If it's a buck you don't want to shoot anyway, maybe he does blow up into something. Another one was you said if you'd have shot him, you would have said it was because he was a cull buck.
Yeah.
I think that's another big thing is guys just want to shoot a buck, so they shoot one, and then like for the stupid reason of everybody's going to give them crap on Facebook about it, they're not happy with the deer they shot or whatever, so they feel like they got to make some excuse about it.
Yeah.
Oh, well, he's a cull buck. He wouldn't have been anything anyway.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think that plays into it a lot.
Oh, yeah.
Which I hate because if you were excited enough about that deer to shoot him, be excited about shooting him.
Yep.
Don't make up some bullcrap excuse about him being a cull buck because you're embarrassed of the size of the deer.
Yeah.
And then the really big one, which was like the first point you made, was the doe thing. Because we can look out across the field of 50 deer, and if it's a mix of bucks and does, we can look at the bucks and say, okay, he's got some poor genetics somewhere if it's a mature deer, right? Even a 4-year-old deer, maybe even a 3-year-old. You say, okay, he's probably got some inferior antler genetics, right? Or he was nutritionally deprived, whatever. Like something happened where he's not reaching his full potential.
Yeah.
Now look at all the does out there and tell me which one of those has bad genetics.
Correct.
Antler genetics. And here's the other thing. Even that buck that you point out that says like Fatty, okay, he had poor antler genetics. He still got genes from 2 different deer.
Correct.
That's not to say he didn't get good antler genetics from one of his.
Yep.
And the other ones were just more dominant, I guess would be how you would put that. So he could still pass on good genetics to the offspring.
Potentially.
Because they're still built in his DNA, right? Because if his mother gave him good genetics and the father or whatever gave him bad genetics, he's still got those in there somewhere.
Yep.
You know what I mean? They're just... And there has been some studies to show that on a very small scale, you can affect it a little bit. Because if you are shooting that buck that has the poor genetics, obviously he's not passing them along anymore.
Correct.
but it is not nearly substantial enough to justify culling deer as a real management practice to grow on bigger deer.
Yeah.
And on top of, like, the does also providing genetics that you can't see, the other thing I keep talking about is the nutrition.
Mm-hmm.
That comes from the does.
Mm-hmm.
Their lactation stage, how much good nutrition they're getting during
Mm-hmm.
that goes directly to their buck fawn that they've got.
Yeah.
If he's deprived at that stage,
Yep.
he's got to make up for lack of body growth, not lack of antler growth,
Mm-hmm.
because all the extra antler growth is from excess nutrition,
Mm-hmm.
right? So if he doesn't have enough nutrition to grow physically, he's definitely not going to have enough to grow his antlers to full potential.
Yes.
So he could still have great genetics. He could have 200-inch genetics. If they don't have the food available
Mm-hmm.
when they need it, it's not going to matter. He's never going to make it because he has no excess.
Yeah.
He might end up being a 135-inch, 140-inch deer with great genetics.
Mm-hmm.
He just never made it because he didn't have the proper nutrition either as a fawn or throughout his entire life.
Mm-hmm.
And it could be a stress thing too. We talked about that on Monday's episode. I think we did. Maybe we talked about it before. I don't remember. At some point today, we talked about the amount of does you have affecting the stress level of buck during the rut.
Yeah.
If he is so stressed out during the rut because he's trying to breed every doe that's out there, he's going to be making up for a lot of lost body weight
Mm-hmm.
that winter when he's feeding,
Yeah.
as opposed to putting on extra that carries over into the next year and the next spring for his next set of antlers.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of catching up on his body weight, now he's already at a good weight. He's putting that excess into his antlers.
Yeah.
So there's a lot that goes into it that way too.
Yep.
And that's why, like, some of those same studies will tell you that, like, the findings on it have been that the doe actually has more to do with the buck's potential
Mm-hmm.
for antler growth than the father of that deer in his antler genetics. Because, again, they're getting it from both of them.
Yep.
And then on top of the genetics, the buck has nothing to do with how much nutrition that deer is getting. The doe has everything to do with it.
Yeah.
And you do as a habitat manager as well.
Yep. We need to make sure that we're giving them everything that we can to ensure that they are as healthy as possible when they're carrying the fawns, when they're feeding, when they're nursing the fawns. Yeah. Everything that we can do along the line there will benefit and increase all of that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And whether that's, minerals and feeds mixed in with your food plots, where that's legal,
Mm-hmm.
or if it's just putting out food plots, if it's going in to do some timber stand improvement so they have more natural browse, there's a lot of things that you can do to give them that head start.
Yeah.
As opposed to just killing a buck because he didn't have superior antlers on his head.
Yep.
Right?
Yep. Fatty to me was there,
Mm-hmm.
I'd watched him for 3 seasons there, and knew he wasn't getting any bigger.
That was what he was going to be.
Yeah. For whatever reason, that's where he was at. And all these other deer that he was pushing around had, 20, 30, 40 inches on him. you know.
Right.
And he's still the one that comes into the food plot every night about an hour after dark, and he runs every other deer off, and he stands there and he eats for 2 hours.
Yeah. Right.
Right. I ain't excited about Fatty.
Yeah. And you just see that too, because like you said, that one you got this year definitely has the same genetics.
Yep, he did.
And in certain areas, at the cabin for a long time, and it's not this way now. One of the deer there now is somewhat similar, but used to, all the bucks there had big swooping main beams, and they come curl around in the front really hard. Whether it's 8-point, 6-point, 10-point, whatever it was, very similar genetics in that area. It's changed over time now for whatever reason. So there is that, obviously, that goes into it, but to think that you can really change that by killing 1 or 2 bucks a year, it's just not feasible in practice. You said it makes sense in principle, well, in practice, it's not practical.
Yeah.
So when you're out there hunting this winter and this late season, and you're looking at that scrappy horn little 2.5-year-old, you think, yeah, I'm going to kill him. He's a cull buck.
Yep.
That's what I'll tell everybody.
Yeah.
I don't have to be embarrassed about this thing. He's a cull buck.
Yep.
go ahead and line him up, put a little meat in the freezer.
Yeah.
No one be any the wiser.
Yep.
Maybe let him walk. Shoot a doe. If you have that option.
Yeah.
And this, again, is we're talking about hunting and managing with the purpose of growing big deer. Because if you're just hunting for, like, if you're happy with that deer and you want to kill him, sure. But don't do it because he's a cull buck.
Yep.
You know. I actually, I think last week's episode, I talked a little bit about that. People giving everybody crap on Facebook for the way they're hunting and all that.
Yep.
And that's definitely where some of that stuff comes from when a guy's got to call it he's taking those genes out of the gene pool, taking that buck out of the gene pool or whatever, because that's his excuse for shooting that young deer or the little deer.
Yep.
You know, there's people that hunt in here, some of the places I hunt, that kind of, they'll tell you that they're not going to kill anything younger than whatever or smaller than whatever and all that, but then they do, and it's like, he wasn't going to be anything anyway.
Yep.
Well, definitely not now.
He's as big as he's going to be.
Yeah, that's right. He's in the freezer, so he's not growing anymore.
Yep.
But, and then, you know, that's kind of part of the, if I don't kill him, my neighbors will attitude also, I think, which is not necessarily culling bucks, but like if you've got that 3-year-old that looks pretty nice, and, well, if I don't shoot him, the neighbors are going to shoot him. That's another one. If you do it, you're that neighbor, right?
Yeah.
Like if you put him in the freezer, he's never getting any bigger.
Yeah.
And that is the same principle with the cull bucks. If you kill him at 2.5 because he looks ratty, he's definitely not ever going to make it any bigger.
Yep.
And the spike thing's another one too, where, and I think we're probably getting past that for the most part, but you still see it on Facebook a lot. Like, guys, spikes are always a spike. He's never going to turn anything. He's just a spike.
Yep.
I specifically remember one example that was in I think it was on an online publication of a magazine. I don't remember which one it was, but they had followed this deer that was in captivity, but it was one of those like thousands of acres kind of things. So they knew where he was at, but he started out as a spike and ended up being, like, his 5 and 6-year-old season, like 180 plus inch deer.
Yeah.
And then he went downhill after that, and it died at like 11 or something crazy. But yeah, he was born a spike in his first couple of years. It didn't look like anything, and then he's a Boone and Crockett 10 or 12 point.
Yeah.
You know, it was just a massive deer.
Yep.
And there's just so much. I do think if you have a deer that's like 2.5 and he's got 8 or 10 points, maybe that's, like, he's got some really good potential.
For
you know
sure.
What I mean? Probably over the one that is just a forkhorn at 2 years old or 1.5 years. But again, that could flip too.
Yeah.
That 8 point, that could be all he's ever going to be too. He might just end up being a 135 inch 8 point that weighs 350 pounds.
Yep.
And that a forkhorn may turn into a 170 inch deer.
Yeah.
But.
Yep. I do know a guy that's still all about killing spikes. I was like, man.
Yeah.
He's like, how many? I said, how many? You know, just monster old spikes you see. He's like, everybody kills them before they get there. I was like, oh, no.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. That is funny, though, because I've known of a couple of those. But that kind of proves your point. I've known of a couple big spikes in the 20 years, well, not quite 20, 15 years I've been hunting.
Yep.
So.
There's a guy on TikTok that's chasing this buck that he calls Spikezilla. Have you seen that? I mean, it's an incredible buck. He's got these monster spikes. He does have brow tines, but, like, he's huge.
Yeah.
Like, if there was ever a cull buck, that'd be one, too.
You're right.
I mean, honestly, those things, he looks like he's got 20-inch spikes, you know, and they come, I mean, he's wild looking.
Yeah.
But dude's trying to kill that thing pretty hard.
Yeah. I do remember, and maybe that's where it stems from, like, when I was growing up, you watch the Outdoor Channel and all these guys down in Texas or whatever, they'd go on these management hunts. They'd shoot these management bucks, which was just another way of saying a cull buck. And I think that's probably where a lot of it stems from nowadays. These guys watched all that on TV for so many years. I really don't see as much of it now, but it does still take place, these, whatever they call management bucks that they're shooting. I don't know. That's one of those things where sometimes you got to do a little bit of research on your own, or hopefully maybe just listen to this podcast, because we're trying not to lead you astray. But anyway, we don't want to keep it pretty short on Fridays. Hopefully I'd like to get you guys in a little more often on these Friday ones because, again, that's where we talk more about the strategy stuff now. And I like keeping the Monday ones kind of the regular, more laid back, just shooting the breeze about hunting episodes. So the more I can get you guys on here, I think it'd be good too. So that'll do it for episode number 9 of the Full Draw Friday edition. So if you guys want to support what we're doing here, you can go to ridgehunteroutdoors.com and you can use discount code FULLDRAW, all caps, and that'll get you 10% off anything you find on the website. Also, don't forget about the Apple giveaway we're doing. Go over to Apple Podcasts, leave us a review, and you'll be entered to win a Wild Game Innovation Spark 2.0 trail camera package. We're going to draw for that once we hit 25 reviews on Apple Podcasts. So follow us on Spotify. Go subscribe to the YouTube channel. We really appreciate all that. Appreciate you guys tuning in every week. Apologize for not getting one of these out last Friday. It's been just a busy time of year, obviously, for everybody. So going to try to get back on the wagon here, getting them out every week. We'll have number 10 for you next Friday. We'll catch you then. Thanks for tuning in again this week.